I woke to the same gray light filtering through the curtains, the kind that never quite warms a small city morning. The air carried that faint chill, like the river mist clinging to everything. 20 years in this house, and the silence had become my routine. Pouring coffee for him, folding laundry that smelled of his work shirts, burying the questions that scratched at me from the inside. That morning, as I walked to the corner store, I passed her. A woman in her 40s, maybe, with short hair and a stride that cut through the quiet street. Our eyes met for a second too long. Something shifted in my chest, a pull I hadn't felt in decades. 20 years of hiding who I was, and now this truth threatened everything. My marriage, this life we'd built on unspoken compromises. That moment lingered, pulling me toward the library downtown. The small city wrapped around us like a worn blanket, comfortable but threadbare. Our house sat on Elm Street, 2 stories of brick that creaked in the wind off the river. Mornings started with the hum of the coffee maker, Tom shuffling in from the garage, grease still under his nails from fixing trucks at the shop. We'd eat toast at the kitchen table, talking about the weather or the neighbor's new fence. It masked the unease, that low hum in my gut that never quite settled. Evenings blurred into the same rhythm. I'd cook dinner, chicken and potatoes, simple things from the market downtown, while he watched the news. We'd sit on the porch sometimes, watching cars pass on the main drag, their headlights cutting through the dusk. The city wasn't big enough to lose yourself in, but just small enough to feel every glance, every whisper. I told myself this was stability, after all the drifting I'd done before him. It hadn't always felt this way. I remembered our wedding day back in the summer of '94. The church bells rang out over the square, and the air smelled of cut grass and my mother's lilacs. Tom stood there in his rented suit, smiling like he'd won something. I was 25, fresh from a community college, with dreams that felt too big for this place. But when he kissed me, I pushed down the flicker. The way my college roommate's laugh had lingered in my mind, her hand brushing mine during late-night study sessions. I'd met Elena in my second year. She was from the city over, studying art, with paint under her nails and stories that made my world expand. We shared a dorm room, whispers turning into something warmer in the dark. One night, after a party, her lips found mine. It was electric, her fingers in my hair, the taste of cheap wine. But morning came, and fear crashed in. What would people say? My family, this town. They expected straight lines, safe paths. I pulled away, buried it deep. When Tom proposed a year later, it felt like the right choice. Secure, expected. Now, 20 years on, those early suppressions echoed in the quiet moments. I'd catch myself staring at the river from our kitchen window, the water silt brown and steady, carrying secrets downstream. Tom was kind, steady, fixed the leaky faucet without complaint, remembered my birthday with flowers from the corner florist. But when he reached for me at night, his touch felt like duty, not desire. My body tensed, a knot forming in my shoulders, heat rising not from want, but from the lie. The unease grew in the fall, when leaves turned and crunched underfoot on my walks to the post office. The city felt smaller then, everyone bundled against the chill, faces familiar from high school or church. I nodded at Mrs. Harlan watering her mums, but inside, questions stirred. Why did I linger on the women in the park, their easy laughter as they pushed strollers or sipped coffee? Why did Tom's arm around me feel like a weight, not a comfort? Then came the community event at the old mill hall, the one they hold every October for the harvest fair. Strings of lights hung from the rafters, the air thick with cider and fried dough. Tom was off talking trucks with the guys, so I wandered the booths alone, fingering handmade scarves. That's when I saw her again. The woman from the street. She was behind a table of pottery, her hands steady as she wrapped a mug for a customer. "Need help finding something?" she asked, her voice low, like the river's murmur. I froze. Up close, her eyes were hazel, flecked with green. "Just looking," I said, but my voice caught. She smiled, tilting her head. "I'm Lena. New in town, sort of. Run the studio downtown." We talked for minutes about the clay from the riverbank, how it held shapes if you knew how to work it. Her fingers brushed mine as she handed me a small bowl. Warmth spread up my arm, unbidden. I bought the bowl, fled back to Tom with my cheeks burning. That night, lying beside him, the tension coiled tighter. His breathing evened out, but sleep evaded me. The bowl sat on the nightstand, cool under my fingertips. What if I'd stayed? What if I'd let that warmth grow instead of snuffing it? The unspoken desires pressed in, heavy as the quilts we'd pulled up against the draft. A week later, I bought a notebook from the drugstore, plain blue cover that fit in my purse. In the quiet afternoons, while Tom was at work, I'd sit at the desk in the spare room, pen scratching against paper. I wonder if... I'd write, then cross it out. The words came halting, memories of Elena, the pull toward Lena, the ache of pretending. My hand shook as I hid it under sweaters in the closet, heart thudding at every creak of the floorboards. What if he found it? What if this city, with its thin walls and knowing eyes, saw through me? The doubts multiplied, shadows lengthening as winter approached. I'd pour tea and stare at the steam rising, curling like questions I couldn't voice. Tom noticed my quiet, asked if I was tired. I nodded, smiled. But inside, the mask cracked a little more each day. The journal stayed hidden, but the questions wouldn't. Winter settled in slow, the small city's streets slick with ice that crunched under my boots. I started taking longer walks, not just to the post office, but out along the river path, where the willows hung heavy with frost. The air bit at my cheeks, sharp as the thoughts circling my head. The city was changing in small ways. New coffee shop on Main with chalkboard signs. A mural splashed across the old warehouse wall. Bright colors against the gray brick, like cracks letting light in. It mirrored something in me. Those fissures widening, letting doubts seep through. I'd bundle up in my wool coat, the one with frayed cuffs, and follow the path where gravel gave way to packed dirt. The river ran murky, silt stirring at the edges from recent rains. Ducks huddled on the bank, their calls flat against the cold. I watched them sometimes, how they moved in pairs, necks arching close, but my eyes drifted to the women jogging past, their breaths puffing white, ponytails swinging. One had a stride like Lena's, confident, unapologetic. I wondered about her life, the mornings she woke to, the hands she held without hiding. Curiosity sparked there, faint at first, like embers under ash. Why did I notice the curve of her jacket against the wind, the way her laugh carried back on the breeze? Back home, I'd shake it off, stir soup on the stove, the steam rising thick. But the walks pulled me out again, day after day, the city's pulse quickening around me. A bookstore had opened in the square, windows steamed from inside. Women lingered there, chatting over paperbacks, their voices overlapping like river currents. One evening, Tom and I sat at the kitchen table, forks scraping plates. The light from the overhead bulb cast shadows on the linoleum, worn smooth from years of steps. He'd had a long day at the shop, talking about a busted transmission, his hands still rough from wiping down tools. I nodded, pushing peas around my plate. "You seem distant lately," he said, setting his fork down. His eyes met mine, steady but searching. I froze, fork midway to my mouth. Just tired. The cold gets to me. My voice came out thin, like the ice on the window panes. He reached across, his palm warm on my knuckles. "We've been through worse. Remember that flood in '05? Water up to the porch steps?" He squeezed, gentle. But his touch landed flat, no spark jumping between us. I pulled back slow, blaming the chill in my fingers. The distance stretched there, not just in the space between our chairs, but in the years we'd stacked like unspoken bricks. He went back to his meal, the clink of silverware filling the quiet. I stared at the salt shaker, its grains shifting like silt in water. How long had we been orbiting each other, polite strangers in this house? The next morning, I headed to the library downtown, the one with the stone steps worn concave from generations of feet. The building smelled of old paper and polished wood, heaters humming low. I wandered the stacks, fingers trailing spines, avoiding the history section where Tom liked to browse. In the back corner, tucked among local authors, a slim book caught my eye. Rivers of Her Own, the title read, cover showing a woman by water, hair loose in the wind. The author's name was, local, Clara Voss, from the next county over. My heart thudded as I cracked it open. Pages filled with stories of women finding each other late, after marriages and children, the pull of truth cutting through the routine. One line hit hard. The river doesn't ask permission to bend. I read standing there, pulse racing in my ears, the words blurring slightly. Heat climbed my neck, and I glanced around. Empty aisles, just the tick of a clock. This wasn't some distant tale, it echoed the silt in my veins, the unspoken bends in my path. I bought it with cash, slipping it into my bag like contraband. That night, after Tom fell asleep, snoring soft beside me, I sat up in the bed's glow from the street lamp. The quilt pulled to my chin, flannel rough against my skin. I thought of my youth, those summers before college, swimming in the river with girlfriends from school. We'd splash and laugh, bodies close in the current, towels shared on the bank. No labels then, just the warmth of skin on skin, the thrill of secrets whispered under stars. I'd chosen safety after. Tom's steady hand, the house on Elm, the life that fit the small city shape. But unlived paths branched in my mind now, vivid as the book's pages. What if I'd followed that current instead of damming it? Regret tasted bitter, like cold river water, but mixed with a quiet hunger. The reflections came nightly, pulling me from sleep. I'd trace the book's edges under the covers, flashlight beam narrow. The city outside hummed faint. Car tires on wet pavement, a distant train whistle. My body stirred, restless, the ache low in my belly. Youth felt close then, not buried, but stirring like silt disturbed. The book stayed with me, its words echoing louder each day. Spring crept in hesitant, the small city's air turning thick with the scent of thawing mud from the riverbanks. Nights stretched longer, but sleep came fitful. After Tom turned out the light, his breathing steady beside me, I'd slip from the bed. The floorboards creaked soft under my bare feet, cool against my skin. In the kitchen, the laptop waited on the counter, screen glowing dim in the dark. I'd pour a glass of water, the tap running cold, and settle at the table. Fingers hovering over keys, heart thudding like gravel under tires. Online searches started small, queries typed quick, deleted faster. Women who... I'd pause, glance toward the hallway shadow. The city felt too close, even in the quiet hours, neighbors' lights flickering off one by one, the distant hum of the bridge traffic. Anonymity here was fragile, like thin ice on the river. One wrong click, and whispers could spread by morning coffee at the diner. But the pull won. Forums loaded slow, stories spilling out, women like me, married decades, waking to truths buried deep. Their words hit like silt stirred up, raw, murky, real. I waited too long, one wrote. My throat tightened. I scrolled deeper, pulse racing, the chair's wood digging into my back. Hours blurred. I'd closed the laptop abrupt when Tom's alarm buzzed upstairs, shoving it into the drawer with the dish towels. Daylight brought the mask back, smiling over breakfast, his hand brushing mine as he passed the jam. But inside, the searches lingered, a current pulling stronger. One evening, after a library shift volunteering for the book drive, I found a flyer tucked in my bag. Plain paper, edges curling. Women's Circle, every Thursday, discreet space. Downtown. No names, just an address near the old warehouse district. My fingers trembled, folding it. The next Thursday, I told Tom I was meeting a friend from the library for tea. He nodded, eyes on the paper, not pressing. The drive downtown felt endless, streetlights pooling yellow on the wet pavement. I parked 2 blocks away, hood up against the drizzle, heart slamming ribs. The door was unmarked, tucked beside a laundromat. I knocked soft, knuckles white. A woman answered, mid-40s, salt in her dark hair, smile cautious. "First time?" she asked, voice low. I nodded, stepping in. The room smelled of chamomile and faint smoke, chairs in a loose circle under strung lights. 8 women, maybe, ages scattered like leaves on the path. Some leaned close, murmuring. Others sat straight, arms crossed. No judgments in their eyes, just quiet welcome. We started with names. "I'm Ruth," I said, voice cracking slight. Hands around warm mugs, steam rising. Stories unfolded slow. One spoke of leaving her husband after 30 years. The relief, like shedding wet clothes. Another stayed, redefining boundaries, her partner's confusion turning to support. I listened, throat dry, the words tasting like validation I'd starved for. A woman across from me, Jill, with calloused hands from carpentry, met my gaze. "It's okay to wonder," she said, her voice wrapped gentle, like flannel against chill. For the first time, the knot in my chest loosened a fraction. Seen, not alone. Interactions lingered after. Jill walked me to my car, rain pattering on our umbrellas. "Come back," she said, her shoulder brushing mine accidental. Warmth spread, unforced. I drove home fogged, the city's lights blurring, questions churning, guilt hit hard the next morning. Tom loaded the dishwasher, humming off-key to the radio. Our routine strained now, threads pulling tight. I'd catch his glance, hopeful, and force a laugh at his joke about the weather. But inside, cycles spun. Elation from the meeting, crashing into shame. What was I doing? This life we'd built, his steady job, our shared porch swings, cracked under the weight. Evenings, he'd suggest a movie, arm around my shoulders. I'd lean in, but the closeness chafed, like wool, too rough. Intimate. Moments worsened it. One night, after dinner, he pulled me close in the living room, the couch springs sighing, his lips on my neck, hands familiar on my waist. My body responded, mechanical, skin prickling, not with desire, but suppression. Heat, built low, but twisted wrong, longing for the circle's easy touches, Jill's knowing smile. I tensed, breath shallow, pushing him away gentle. "Tired," I murmured. He rolled back, hurt, flickering in his eyes. The air hung heavy, silence thicker than the river mist. I lay awake after, sheets tangled, ache throbbing deep. Suppressed, it burned like grit under skin. The meetings became weekly anchors. I'd slip out, return with cheeks flushed from more than cold. Stories shared grew bolder, mine still whispers, but real. Validation tasted sweet, like river water, clear after rain, yet home weighed heavier, Tom's questions sharpening. "Where do you go, really?" I'd deflect, heart thudding. The duality pulled, tearing, slow. The meetings became my anchor, but the weight at home grew heavier. Summer heat settled over the small city like a heavy quilt. The air thick with the scent of river silt baked dry. I'd drive to the meetings now, windows down, wind tugging at my hair. The warehouse district blurred past, chain-link fences rattling faint. At the door, my knock grew surer, though my pulse still quickened. Jill became the one I sought out. After the circle broke, we'd linger by the tea urn, steam curling between us. "Tell me more," she'd say, her voice low, eyes steady. One night, she shared her story, left a marriage after kids were grown, moved here for the quiet. Her hands wrapped the mug tight, knuckles pale. I nodded, the words pulling at my own buried silt. Our talks spilled outside the meetings. She'd text sometimes, simple things. "River trail tomorrow?" I'd hesitate, phone warm in my palm, then reply, "Yes." We walked the path at dawn, gravel crunching under boots, willows dipping low. She pointed out herons, necks arched long, and I told her fragments, college days, the roommate who lingered in dreams. Her laugh came soft, not mocking, just real. "Sounds like you knew even then," she said. Warmth spread in my chest, like sunlight breaking mist. The friendship felt tentative, fragile as new clay. We'd sit on the bench by the bend, feet dangling over the edge, water murmuring below. Shared stories wove slow. Her first love, a woman from art school. My wedding day, the lilacs masking doubt. Her shoulder brushed mine once, accidental on the shift of wood. I didn't pull away. The touch lingered, electric, stirring silt I'd long ignored. But the small city watched. Gossip moved like river current, swift under the surface. At the market I caught Mrs. Harlan's glance, eyes narrowing over her cart of greens. "Heard you're out walking a lot," she said, voice sweet as iced tea. My stomach knotted, heat rising to my face. I mumbled about fresh air, fled with my bags heavy. Whispers could unravel. Everything. Tom's shop buddies, asking questions. Neighbors, peering over fences. Caution sharpened. I deleted texts quick, parked farther from the laundromat. The risk heightened every step, heart thudding like boots on packed dirt. Yet the pull grew. Jill's affirming gestures jolted me, small but sharp. One walk, she handed me a smooth stone from the bank, cool and rounded. "For the rough days," she said, fingers grazing mine. The weight settled in my pocket, a secret anchor. At home, it contrasted the routine, Tom's arm around my waist during dishes, his grip familiar but flat. His touch landed dutiful, no spark jumping. I'd tense, water running hot over plates, mind drifting to Jill's easy nearness. The jolt came then, a twist in my gut, longing sharp as river thorns. Nights, the journal called, no longer scraps of wonder, entries turned confessions. I'd sit at the desk, lamp casting yellow pool, pen digging deep. "I am this," I wrote, words spilling raw. Identity shaped on the page. Queer, hidden, now clawing free. The blue cover swelled thicker, pages curling at edges. Sweat beaded on my neck, the house creaking around me. Fear nipped close. What if Tom opened the closet, found the truth stacked like sweaters? He noticed the withdrawal, eyes lingering over breakfast. Coffee steamed between us, the clock ticking loud. "You're slipping away," he said one morning. Fork paused midair. His voice held hurt, edges rough like calluses. I looked up, toast dry in my mouth. "Work's busy. Library stuff." The lie sat heavy, silt in my throat. He set the fork down. Slow. "It's more. We used to talk." His hand reached, hovered, then dropped. Tension hung, air thick as summer storm. I nodded vague, changed the subject to the neighbor's dog. But his questions pressed, vague talks turning tense. Evenings on the porch, he'd probe gentle. "Anything wrong?" And I'd deflect, rocking the chair hard. The silence between us widened, cracks running deep. Jill's presence pulled harder against it. We met for coffee once, the new shop's windows fogged. She leaned in, voice dropping. "You're braver than you think." Her words landed soft, validating the ache. Emotional jolts followed, a shared glance holding too long, her hand steadying me on uneven path. Each one contrasted the marital drift, Tom's steady kindness feeling distant now, like echoes across the river. The duality tore, loyalty tugged homeward, authenticity toward her. I'd drive back, city lights smearing, journal burning in my bag. Stories shared with Jill unlocked more, the friendship rooting deep. Caution wove through it, gossip's shadow lengthening. But the gestures, the talks, they cracked the mask, wider. Our friendship deepened, forcing me to confront the silence head on. Fall winds picked up, stripping leaves from the willows along the river, scattering them like scattered thoughts. The small city's seasons turned restless, air sharpening with the bite of coming frost. Mornings brought fog, rolling thick off the water, cloaking the streets in gray haze that mirrored the unrest churning inside me. I'd step out for air, coat pulled tight, but the chill seeped deeper into the bones of my choices. Loyalty pulled one way, authenticity the other, tearing at the seams. Tom deserved the woman he'd married, the one who laughed at his stories, shared his bed without shadows. We'd built this on promises, 20 years of quiet compromises, his hand steady through floods and job losses. But authenticity clawed free now, raw and insistent, whispering of Jill's easy gaze, the circle's warm circle. I paced the kitchen at dawn, coffee cooling untouched, the conflict escalating like the river, swelling after rain. How could I honor him without betraying myself? The knot in my chest tightened, breath short against the weight. One afternoon, the close call came sharp. I'd left the journal out, blue cover peeking from under the couch cushion after a hurried hide during Tom's early return from the shop. He called from the living room while I chopped onions in the kitchen, knife slipping in my grip. "Ruth, what's this?" His voice carried flat, then paused. I froze, heart thudding hard, a drum against my ribs. The air thickened with the scent of onions, sharp and stinging eyes. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, legs heavy as I walked in. He held it, pages splayed but not open, just the cover, innocent in his calloused palm. "Found it under here. Yours?" His eyes met mine, question hanging, sweat beaded cold on my neck. Old notes, recipes, nothing much. The lie stuck, gritty in my throat. I reached, casual, but my fingers trembled, taking it back. He nodded slow, turning to the window, but doubt lingered in his shoulders. I slipped it into the drawer later, pulse racing long after, fear coiling like fog around the house. One glimpse inside, and the silt would spill. Confessions of Jill, the meetings, the woman I'd buried. The city felt smaller then, walls pressing in, every creak a potential unravel. The seasons built their own pressure, leaves crunching red and gold underfoot, winds whipping the river into choppy waves. I'd walk the path alone now, avoiding Jill's texts some days, the colors shifting vivid against the unrest. Pumpkins lined porches downtown, their hollow eyes mocking the masks I wore. The air carried wood smoke from neighbors' fires, acrid and clinging, like the guilt that followed me home. Tom tried harder, brought wildflowers from the roadside, their stems damp in his fist. "For you," he'd say, placing them on the table. I'd smile, vase filling with water that sloshed unsteady, but inside, the pull warred fiercer. Deeper into the queer community, I leaned anyway. The circle hosted a small event at the warehouse, a reading night, chairs scraped close under dim bulbs. I went alone, hood up against the chill, slipping in late. Women filled the space, voices overlapping soft, sharing poems that cut straight to the bone. One read about late awakenings, words landing like stones in still water. The truth bends you before it breaks. I sat in the back, knees drawn but eyes drawn forward. A woman beside me, older, silver hair loose, nodded as it ended. "It's home," she murmured. Her hand rested near mine on the armrest, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. Feeling seen washed over me then, a rush like river current clearing silt. Applause rippled, and I joined, palms stinging. After, conversations bloomed, stories of first loves reclaimed, partners who stayed or left with grace. Jill found me in the corner, her smile tentative. "Glad you came." We talked edges, her arm brushing mine in the crowd. The validation hummed, electric against the homeward drive, city lights streaking wet on the windshield. For hours I wasn't the wife hiding. I was Ruth, whole in fragments. But nights brought dreams, unbidden and fierce. I'd wake in sweat, sheets twisted around legs, the room close and dark. One had me back in college, Elena's hands on my waist, pulling close by the dorm window. The kiss deepened, real as breath, her fingers tracing my spine. But Tom appeared then, face blurring, his voice calling from the hall. I pulled away, heart slamming, only to turn and see Jill waiting in the shadows, hand outstretched. The dream shifted, river rushing underfoot, pulling me under. I'd bolt up, gasping, skin slick, the ache low and insistent. Suppressed desires revealed themselves raw, no hiding in sleep. I'd slip to the bathroom, water running cold on my face, staring at the mirror's fogged reflection. Who was this woman, caught between currents? The conflict mounted daily. Loyalty whispered, "Stay. Mend the cracks with Tom," his gentle probes over dinner. "I miss us," eyes pleading. Authenticity roared louder, fueled by the event's glow, Jill's texts lighting my phone. I'd delete them quick, but the pull lingered. Seasons turning colder, unrest mirroring the frost-etching windows. The journal filled faster, pages thick with the war. I can't lose him, but I can't lose me. Fear from the close call echoed, heart thudding at every unexpected knock. Tom's glances sharpened, vague talks turning pointed. "You're elsewhere," he'd say. "Fork scraping plate." I'd nod, throat tight, the pressure coiling unbearable. The pressure built until one evening I couldn't hold back anymore. The evening arrived unannounced, the small city's sky bruising purple as I pulled into the driveway. Tom's truck sat crooked like he'd parked in haste after a long shift. Inside, the house smelled of takeout, Chinese from the place on the edge of town, cartons open on the coffee table. He sat on the couch, remote in hand, but the TV flickered silent, just static, humming low. I hung my coat, the hook cold against my fingers, and felt the air thicken, heavy as pre-storm damp. He looked up, eyes tired, lines etched deeper around his mouth. "Late again? Library?" The word hung, not quite. Accusation, but, edged. I nodded, slipping off my boots, gravel from the path still clinging to the soles. Helping with inventory. The lie landed flat, silt in the silence. He set the remote down, slow. "Ruth, this isn't you. The walks, the meetings, whatever it is. We've got 20 years. Talk to me." His voice cracked slight, hand gesturing loose at the room. The framed photos on the mantel, our wedding smiles frozen in time. Heat rose in my chest, the resentments bubbling up like river mud, disturbed. I stood there, arms crossed tight, the journal's weight pulling at my thoughts. "You wouldn't understand," I said, sharper than meant. "You fix trucks, come home, expect everything the same." But I'm not. His face shifted, hurt flashing quick. "What does that mean? I've been here, every day, through your moods, the winters that drag. I thought we were solid." He stood now, pacing to the window, back to me. The glass reflected his outline, broad shoulders slumped. The argument built then, words spilling unchecked. "Solid? It's been duty, Tom?" Smiling through it, pretending. My voice rose, echoing off the walls. "You never asked what I needed, really. Just assumed I'd follow your path. The house, the routine, no questions." He turned, eyes narrowing. "And you? Hiding out there, coming back distant. If it's not me, what is it? Another man? Some crisis?" His hands balled at his sides, knuckles white like the frost waiting outside. I froze. The truth lodged in my throat, bitter as cold water. "It's not a man." The words escaped, partial, but enough to halt him. Silence crashed in, thicker than the fog rolling off the river. His face paled, questions forming but unspoken. Resentments hung between us, my buried longings, his unasked pains, 20 years of what-ifs unspoken. I grabbed my keys, the metal biting palm. "I need air." The door slammed behind me, cool night wrapping tight. I drove without thought, out past the city edges where lights thinned to stars pricking black. The road wound narrow, flanked by fields silvered in moonlight, the river glinting far below. Gravel crunched as I pulled over to overlook, engine ticking down to quiet. Turmoil churned, chest heaving, tears hot on cheeks. The argument replayed, his hurt eyes, my sharp edges. What had we become? Strangers sharing a bed, masks cracking under pressure. I gripped the wheel, knuckles aching, the dashlights casting green glow on my hands. Jill's face flickered in mind, her steady gaze, but so did Tom's, the man who'd held me through miscarriages we never spoke of, the floods that soaked our basement. The drive stretched, miles blurring, processing the storm inside. Loyalty warred with the pull to truth, the small city's confines, feeling vast in the dark. How much more could I carry? The river below rushed indifferent, carving its path. Hours later, dawn graying the horizon, I turned back. The city woke slow, diner lights flickering on, early workers heading to. Shifts. Home loomed, porch light still burning like a question. Inside, Tom slept on the couch, blanket half off, face slack in exhaustion. I moved quiet to the kitchen, kettle whispering as water heated. Coffee first, then the notebook. Not the journal, but fresh paper from the drawer. Hands trembling, I sat at the table, pen scratching, halting. Tom, I wrote, letters uneven. I've hidden something for 20 years. It's who I am, not what we've done. The words poured then. College whispers, the pull toward women, the meetings, Jill's name, a shadow I skirted, confessions spilled raw, the page filling with silt of unspoken life. My fingers cramped, ink smudging where tears fell. The house creaked around me, sunlight slanting through curtains, warming the floor. A flash came mid-sentence. Empathy, sharp as river stone. Tom proposing under those lilacs, believing in the future we'd shape. His world narrowed to the shop. The house? Me as anchor. What would this shatter for him? Loneliness in the bed we'd shared. Questions from buddies at the garage. I paused, pen hovering, seeing his perspective. The trust built brick by brick, now trembling. He'd given steady, deserved honesty in return. The weight settled deeper, but so did resolve. Hiding hurt us both, slow erosion like the riverbank. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, hand shaking as I wrote his name. The stakes crystallized then, potential loss, vast, the home, the routines, the man who'd been my safety net. Divorce whispers in this city spread fast, judgments from church friends, isolation deeper than winter fog. But speaking meant freedom. Authenticity blooming amid the grief. I couldn't draft forever. The words demanded air. Tom stirred in the living room, footsteps heavy. I stood, envelope clutched, heart slamming like waves on rock. The kitchen hung still, coffee scent mingling with the paper's fresh bite. The words finally came out, shattering the quiet kitchen. Tom's footsteps stopped at the kitchen threshold, his shadow stretching long across the linoleum. The envelope trembled in my hand, edges creased from my grip. Coffee steam curled faint between us, the pot's drip echoing sharp. I set the letter down, slow, my voice, breaking the quiet like gravel under tire. Tom, read this. Please. The words stuck, raw in my throat. He stepped closer, eyes dropping to the paper. His fingers brushed mine, taking it. Rough calluses, scraping skin. He unfolded it, chair scraping as he sat, the wood groaning under his weight. Silence built, thick as river fog rolling in at dawn. I watched his face, jaw tightening, brows knitting deep. Minutes stretched, my pulse thudding low in my ears, heat flushing my neck. He looked up finally, paper crinkling in his fist. This, you and women? All these years? His voice came low, shock threading through like silt in clear water. Silence followed, heavy, his breath shallow. He pushed back from the table, chair legs screeching, pacing, to the window. The glass pane fogged slight from his exhale, river visible distant, churning gray. Questions tumbled then, halting. When? College? Or always? He turned, eyes searching mine, hurt raw as an open cut. Jill, who is she? The meetings? Each word landed like stones, skipping water, rippling out. I stood frozen, vulnerability stripping me bare. Chest tight, skin prickling cold despite the stove's warmth. The truth hung exposed, no hiding in half-lights. It started before us, I said, voice cracking. Elena, then buried, but it's me, Tom, who I am. Halting dialogue spilled. Fragments of the circle, the walks, the ache, low in my belly for touches I'd never claimed. My hands twisted the dish towel, fabric twisting damp. Relief washed physical. A loosening in my shoulders. Breath coming easier after decades damned. But terror mixed in, sharp as frostbite. His face paling, the life we'd stacked teetering. He sank back to the chair, head in hands, elbows thudding table. 20 years, Ruth, I thought. Silence again, broken by a choked sound, not quite sob. The kitchen closed in, walls pressing with the weight of it. Our mugs, side by side, his work boot scuff on the floor. I reached, tentative, my palm hovering near his arm. He flinched, pulling away. The rejection stung. A twist in my gut, but I stayed. Voice soft. I never wanted to hurt you. Initial fallout settled quick. Separate spaces carving the home. He took the guest room upstairs, door clicking shut that night, footsteps fading heavy on the stairs. I lay in our bed alone, sheets cool and vast, the quilt's flannel rough against my cheek. Sleep evaded, mind replaying his shock, the questions unanswered. Mornings blurred, him leaving early for the shop, truck rumbling out before coffee brewed. I'd eat alone, toast crumbs scattering like scattered truths, the silence deeper than winter chill. Small city whispers started subtle, like current under calm surface. At the market, Mrs. Harlan's eyes lingered over produce bins, her morning Ruth edged cool. A neighbor waved from the porch, but the glance darted to my ringless finger. No, still there. But the air shifted. Isolation deepened, the river path feeling longer, willows drooping heavier. I'd walk it now solitary, gravel biting soles, the city's gaze pricking like unseen eyes. Church friends called once, voice tentative on the line. "Everything all right?" I mumbled, "Yes," hung up quick, heart thudding against ribs. Days blurred into uncertainty, the house a shell of echoes, his razor missing from the sink, my journal safe but untouched. But a fragile dialogue emerged, tentative as first thaw. Weeks dragged, the fragile dialogue threading through the house like thin river ice, cracking under weight, but holding. Tom suggested counseling one rainy afternoon, his voice muffled from the guest room doorway. Rain pattered the roof, steady as his gaze meeting mine. "We owe it that much," he said, fingers twisting the knob. I nodded, throat tight. The word, yes, sticking like silt. Our first session came in a low brick building downtown, the waiting room smelling of stale coffee and damp wool. The therapist, Ellen, had silver streaks in her hair and hands folded calm on her lap. We sat across from her, the couch sagging under us, separate cushions like the space between. Words came halting at first, Tom's shock spilling raw, his questions sharp. "How long have you known?" I answered slow, the air heavy with honesty we'd dodged for years. "Since before us." Buried it deep. Pain navigated the room, his shoulders hunching, my fingers digging into palms. But Ellen guided, her voice even. "What do you need now?" Honesty emerged in fragments, my need for space to explore, his for time to grieve the marriage he'd envisioned. Sessions built, weekly, the drive there fogged with unspoken fears. One evening after, Tom gripped the wheel tight, knuckles pale. I see it now, the distance. Wish I'd asked sooner. His admission landed soft, a thaw in the chill. Counseling cracked doors open, but my steps into queer life pulled me outward. The circle welcomed me back. No questions, just mugs pressed warm into my hands. Jill sat closer now, her knee brushing mine accidental in the circle. "You're here," she murmured, eyes holding steady. Validation hummed, real as the tea's steam. I shared more, the confessions fallout, the ache of separation. They listened, nods rippling like water over stones. The first public outing came in early spring, the small city's air turning soft with budding willows. The group planned a walk downtown, no hiding in warehouses. I hesitated, coat clutched tight, but Jill texted, "Join us at the square." Heart thudding, I drove over, parking amid blooming planters. They waited by the fountain, 5 women, scarves loose, laughter carrying light. Jill waved, her smile pulling me in. We strolled Main Street, windows reflecting our steps, the sun warming my face unshielded. A neighbor passed, eyes widening slight, but I held my chin steady. Conversation flowed easy. Stories of first prides, late comings out. One woman's arm linked mine casual, her flannel sleeve rough against my skin. The outing felt exposed, the city's gaze prickling, but freedom stirred low, like river current quickening. No masks, just steps syncing with theirs. Back home I lingered in the mirror, cheeks flushed, the woman staring back less shadowed. Tom's journey unfolded quiet, small gestures marking the shift. He'd leave notes on the counter, "Coffee's hot," or "Take care today." Paper creased from his grip. One morning, after a session, he slid a book across the table. "Read this, if you want." It was about queer awakenings, Pages dog-eared, his handwriting in the margin. Makes sense now. Support bloomed tentative, his eyes softer over breakfast. No probing, just presence. Evenings, he'd retreat to the garage, tools clinking, but return with a shared glance. Acknowledgement in the quiet. I don't get it all, he'd say sometimes, voice low, but I want you whole. The gestures accumulated, like silt building banks. A hug at the door, brief but warm. Questions about the circle, curious, not accusatory. His understanding grew, grief etching lines, but easing the hunch in his shoulders. Emotional payoffs came amid the ache, self-acceptance blooming slow. Nights alone in our bed now, sheets smoothed by my hands. I'd trace the journal's pages, words no longer crossed out. The grief hit waves. For the years lost, the intimacy we'd mimicked, tears hot on pillows, body curling tight, but acceptance rooted deeper, a quiet bloom in my chest, petals unfurling against the pain. I'd wake lighter, breath fuller, the mirror showing eyes clear, not darting. Validation from the circle, from myself, washed the silt away, leaving truth polished, smooth. One session, I spoke it aloud. I'm queer, finally. The word landed free, echoing in the room, relief physical, shoulders dropping like weights lifted. Shifting dynamics reshaped us, love redefining in fragments. We talked boundaries over cooling tea, separate rooms permanent, but shared meals, the house a bridge, not a cage. Futures branched uncertain, him dating slow, a profile on his phone glimpsed, me open to paths with women, Jill's texts warming like sunlight. Counseling mapped it. No divorce papers yet, but agreements etched. Honesty first, no pretending. Love transformed, not romantic, but companionate. Roots tangled deep from 20 years. Friends? He asked once. Tentative smile. I nodded, hand squeezing his across the table, calluses familiar. The river outside mirrored it, bending without breaking, currents finding new courses. Months passed, and the city felt less confining. Summer returned, the small city's heat softening edges, willows full and green along the river. Late-life partnerships stirred cautious, a coffee with Jill turning to walks, her hand brushing mine deliberate now. Slow, she'd say, voice low, eyes holding the bend in my path. Desire bloomed tentative, touches lingering like sunlight on silt. Reflections came on those paths, 20 years' growth etched scars deep, strengths forged in silence broken. The ache of unlived youth faded, replaced by quiet power, body alive in new currents. Community wove tighter, chosen family in the circle's easy laughter, potlucks under strung lights. Tom and I parted amicable, house sold, his nod at the closing, be free, peace settled, truth a steady gaze forward, river carrying me on. I walked the river path unburdened, breeze lifting my hair, the small city opening wide. If this resonated, subscribe for more stories of late awakenings.